Okay, everyone, I am so excited that Severance is finally back. This is my spoiler review of Severance Season 2, Episode 1. Hello, Miss Cobel. Now, I'm so excited this show's back because this is my favorite current show on TV by far. I absolutely love Season 1, so you can always check out my reviews of Season 1 if you're catching up on the show. But it's interesting going into this season, and I watched this first episode. It's at a time where, for the first time ever, I'm very late to the party, but I've been watching Leah Remini's documentary on Scientology. And what I found fascinating was while I was watching the show and then rewatching Severance Season 1, preparing for this, I saw so many similarities, and that continued on in this episode. So I'm going to point out a lot of things that remind me of different things that Scientology does that they allude to in Severance. Now, this episode technically opens where they left off, but really where they left off with the innies' mindsets, not actually at the same timeline, but it opens with the sounds of the innies from the finale, and then they're cut off from the outside world, which we ended on last season, and we jump in to Mark's innie returning to Lumon. And I love when we saw the innies in this episode. It's continuing right from where they left off, but I have a theory about Helly, which we'll get to, where it's a little different in my opinion. So where Innie's Mark's state of mind is now he knows that Miss Casey is his Audi's wife, who he thinks is dead, and he's running in panic looking for her, but it makes sense that he wouldn't know where the wellness area is from where he's going. He never had gone to the wellness area from the elevator, so that's why it would make more sense that if that's the case than him being in a new floor. He also passes a purple carpeted room that looks a lot like the room that was covered that him and Helly went into in season 1, where you see a purple carpet and the same tables that look like some kind of test you take. I'd seen theories when they originally showed that room that it might be a reintegration room, and they go on the theory of themes of the show, colors being blue and green, and then you put together it makes purple. But we get to the wellness room, and there's literally a wall made in its place, so it's officially closed. What was really interesting is when the camera turns around, you see there's a man watching Mark, and it's not Milch. Milch has a blue undershirt in his suit, where this man had a white undershirt, so I wonder who was watching Mark there. I have a feeling it's going to be a new character that's important. So he gets to MDR, but there's a new crew there. We see there's Mark W., then we see Gwendolyn Y. and Dario. And Gwendolyn Y. is played by one of my favorite actresses, Alia Shawkat, who I really love in Arrested Development. It's also interesting this character of Dario has a perk that is like Mark's with his face, but it's wood, and we'll see later in the episode he explains he started in a very poor area of Lumon, so that's why everything's kind of way dated from what he comes from, which is also interesting thinking about how far back this guy went who doesn't look that old, and if that has to do with some kind of severance procedure going on maybe through him for a while now. Interesting. And then you get excited because we see Milch, played by the great Jamel Tillman, and he's like, welcome back Mark S. with the balloons with Mark's face on it. He's like, been a minute. But the first big reveal of the episode is Milchek telling Mark that what you all did 5 months ago was one of the most painful moments in the history of this company. So saying that this is 5 months ago and this happened and that they didn't bring the innie online till 5 months later. Now, I'm not sure if that's the truth. I think it is, but you never know with what they're being told if anything's the truth, especially because you're wondering why it's just now that Milchek is taking over for Miss Cobel's job, even though she was let go technically 5 months ago, according to his timeline. And what's interesting and I love about Tramel Tillman's portrayal of Milchek is he'll say lines like, I too was wounded by it, talking about the rebellion, but he's like, but we must cut to heal, mustn't we? And he always says it bitterly, those kind of lines. So he starts off positive always, and at the end you kind of get his truth in usually his facial expressions. Now, where we're going to make our first connections episode of Scientology in this season is where we meet Miss Wong, who is taking over Milchek's job. This reminds me of the Cadet Org, which is a part in Scientology of the Sea Org that has children that actually start this. You could be 14 years old and be signed off by your parent to just go and work for that part of Scientology in that group. So it's very similar to Scientology in that sense that, yeah, they actually employ people that are basically children. Now, from a severance standpoint, it could also be that Miss Wong is actually older and that she was severed into a child's body. Who knows? But I don't think the show's got to that level yet of craziness, but it could. But Milchek is the new Cobel now. He's moving in his stuff. Then he tells Mark that the four of them have achieved international fame as a group. And he's like, you have become the face of severance reform. And he shows him an article, but make note it's from the Kier Chronicle, and in Scientology they have their own press outlet too, which you can never trust. It's biased, right? Because they're writing about their own thing from their angle. And it says innies blow the whistle, but they crop out the group photo from their desk and put them onto like a parade car that looks from like way back in the day. So it's obviously not something that actually happened, that parade, and they cross out half of the article. So it almost just seems like it's saving face. There's obviously things they don't want people in Lumon reading in that article, because it probably would just be that obvious at that point because they know the truth down there. So I feel like it was just an article they made in their own press to do some damage control. Now, Milch confirms he is an unsevered man. He's like, I locked you in a room like an animal, Mark. As an unsevered man, I will carry that knowledge with me for the rest of my life. And then he says there have been questions how they let a sadist like Harmony Cobel basically operate at Lumon. And then he says he believes she was trying to pursue versions of Mark as a throuple. And this is in line with Scientology, where anyone who then becomes a betrayer or an enemy, they will make blatant lies about the enemy. They're just wild. And this makes sense with that he's just saying that to put her in a bad light now. And that's really, to me, confirming that I do think Miss Cobel will be a character who goes towards the good side as someone who used to be in this Lumon cult and following Kier. And obviously Kier being Ron L. Hubbard type figure. Now, Milchek says none of Mark's teammates agreed to return, even with reforms happening. But he says that Mark insists on returning. In fact, he begged us to let him in right away. I think the only way that really happened is if it's just to get down there to save Miss Casey. When he asked him to show his coworkers out, he's said they didn't want to come. He says that's not possible, Milchek. So that's definitely, obviously, not the total truth. Now, Mark W., we see, calls Milchek Mr. Milkshake, which I thought was great. And I love that the character of Gwendolyn is asking about wind and the sky. And she's like, how's wind? Is it just like getting breathed on? So that was very interesting. What's very interesting about Severance is these innie forms and how much they keep from the outside world and how much they don't. And she seems like she's leaning really far towards the not keeping a lot. Maybe they're being more safe with that too and bringing it down, because when they take the tests, when they first get into Lumon downstairs, they ask them about what states they know, because they want to make sure they know a little bit, but not a lot either. There's like a balance. Now we'll see Miss Wong has this red ball game we saw from season 1 that Milchek did with everybody, and we learned it's Miss Wong's first day as deputy manager. Mark W. also shares that he thought he was going to be permanently retired when his branch shut down, which I thought was also interesting and not just a throwaway line there, and that maybe his Audi is really someone who also, like Helly, works for Lumon. And he says it's a nice surprise he's back. You also see there's a full jar of credits behind them for the vending machine, so you know Dylan hasn't gotten to it yet. But it also makes sense in their reforms and that they're going to amp up the perks in every way possible. Now, when Mark S. has his turn with the ball, he has a thought about the wedding photo of his Audi and Miss Casey together he found in the finale. So that is still there, that memory in him from being an innie in the outside world. So it shows you how valuable all those moments he was in the outside world, those memories he can pick up of who he met, his real life sister and his brother-in-law. Now he goes home for the day, comes back next day, and Gwendolyn shares that her perpetuity wing had animatronic Egans that did a dance. So wherever she came from seems more advanced. Where on the other end, Dario shares, which I was talking about before, that his perpetuity wing was made with brooms and plates as the faces and that they were very poor. And they even had a rope as their elevator, which is absolutely insane. So you just have to wonder if it was just them being really cheap, the company, or this is just somebody who's been severed a couple of times and he's really an older person. So then we'll see Mark has a plan here where he plants the note in Mark W.'s jacket. And the next day it goes to plan because Milchek's reading out the note. He wanted to frame Mark W. on purpose and get caught that it was himself. He wants to shake things up and do everything to piss off Milchek to force him to agree to his terms and have his old team back. I love, though, that Milchek first says, do you really think I'm a shambolic rube? Not asking about the bomb threat part of it. So he demotes Mark, promotes Mark W., but that's when Mark distracts them, telling them he messed with the kitchenette, and he runs into Milchek's office, contacts the board, and it's already a very tense scene, which we know and love in this show, those kind of scenes. And Mark begs the board to have his team back. He's like, if you're truly face of Severance reform, give them a chance. And Milchek possibly has a line in the episode where he says, it's clear Audi's fame has gone to your innie's head. Just killing it with these lines. But he sends him up the elevator, comes back down, and then you see huge Art of Kier there with a bloody sword and an army behind him. And Dylan will read off the name of that art, and it's Kier pardons his betrayers. Those 4 people in front of him. It looks like he's going to forgive them, and he's showing them the light again. And I don't think, again, that any floors changed or anything. I think they just added that art knowing that the old team was coming back together, the rebels, and that's the way they can show them of, oh, it's part of this theme going on of reform and forgiveness, but letting them back in too. It's not like them saying sorry. It's them forgiving them for rebelling. Now, Dylan will come in, and we get to see the old crew start to come in, which is exciting, and they're coming right from the moment they left off. And this is from when Milch tackled him in Lumon, and he's, of course, pissed about his belt. And Irving comes in right from him having his heart broken about Britt. But this is where it gets weird, because Helly runs in off of the elevator, but not like someone just tackled her, which is where we last saw her when she was making her plea to everybody at Lumon what really was going down. Now, my main theory right now, which could be happening but could not be happening, but I do think there's a chance that this Helly is actually her outie, and that she's in there to watch everything and get information, and that her outie Helly's pissed about what happened, she got punished for it, and that she's not allowed to just send a severed self down there anymore. It's too risky. I mean, Helly is the most rebellious of the group, and they've had already a history with her, so I feel like there's no way they would send her back down there, the any Helly. Now, I also think it's hers because Helly points out there's no security camera, maybe to get them more comfortable to speak up. So I feel like she's a spy here, and that they can get away with their reform and showing people, we don't have mics anymore, we don't have cameras. But how do you fix that is having kind of moles set around to listen, and I think Helly is that person. Now, Dylan assumes that Mark probably ended the replacement workers in his lives, but I don't think that's the case. I think we'll see that group again. I don't think they cast that like recognizable of actors just to be a one-off. I think obviously they're going to come into play. And Miss Hong now will take them to the new break room, and you'll see it's an upgrade, right? Because it's not the break room we saw from last season where they had people repeat things again and again until they got it straight to their head. That is a lot like Scientology with the audit they do with their people, that to make sure it's a test to see that they're going through with what their core beliefs are. This time the break room has purple chairs like the purple room, so this is a theme going on. And I want to bring up, because it's on a poster here, the word frolic, aholic. And there's 4 tempers that are focused on the show a lot, which is woe, frolic, dread, and malice. Now, I want to go to one of my favorite theories on Reddit, where the bins that are clearing the scary numbers, that theory, the clearing from those tempers from the innie, those 4 tempers is what they're doing. And you'll see that when they show the final shot of Miss Casey later on the episode, they actually have the initials for those 4 tempers, and that it seems like the scary numbers are removing those tempers from said person and putting them in that person's number in the box. And I think in Miss Casey it was number 3. So that is what they're doing on the computers. And that theory from season 1 someone had makes more and more sense now. And there's also 4 dancers representing the tempers at the waffle party dance. And it's very, very interesting. And having the Frolicaholic poster, like, yeah, that's something that they see as an addiction that you want to get rid of. And I love this little poster in the background that says hang in there, and it's someone running to open the elevator. It means a lot of things too, because it's not just like hang in there, don't quit. It's also, we know what happened in the elevator, and Helly literally tried to hang herself in it. Now, what's also important is Milch says the video they're about to see will be shown to every innie in this building after today. I thought that was an interesting line too, because if every innie in the building is going to see it, it's also going to make the 4 of them celebrities in the building. So I wonder how that's going to affect all the people they would interact with at Lumon. So now I see this video, Lumon is listening, and it's a Lumon building talking. It's weird, it's creepy, it always looks dated with the claymation, which I loved. But again, like Scientology, they have these presentations, they have these videos that are just weird, and everything seems a little dated and off, and that's clearly the case here. That was interesting that the building we're listening to, which is Lumon Building, is the narrator, that 206 countries Lumon operates from. So that could also be something where they go into that more international part of it, especially with this new character of Dario, and if he was in somewhere in like Italy with a Lumon, and how powerful they really are. I love seeing the Macrodat uprising and claymation, and I love they show the part of the love story with Helly and Mark. They angle it as like, this brought new reforms, like more snacks, and it shows Dylan just chugging them, which was great. They got hall passes and now even pineapple bobbing, and a playful mirror room where Irv is terrified. I cannot wait to see that playful mirror room. And you see how the building spins all of this by saying, it took quite the courage of 4 MDR heroes to show me who I really am. I thank Kier for the Macrodat uprising. So you take something that's bad PR and make it good PR that they've learned their lesson and that this is a good thing and that they've changed. And they thank Kier for it, though. So it's still putting it as like, no, not thanking really them. They're thanking Kier for this happening, still putting it attached to him. And them just having any of these reforms is a form of damage control. Now, Milch says to the innies by end of day, they can choose to leave if they want. I am not your jailer. And he also says, like the rest of the severed floors, no mics, no cameras. And like I said before, I think a mole fixes that they wouldn't actually let that happen where people would just be that free without security. And like I said, Tremel Tillman does such a good job at saying one thing with his face and at the end having a different actual emotion showing where he is still angry about all this. And a big moment was when they're about to talk about what happened, the four of them outside. Mark looks around to see if there's cameras, and Helly is the first one saying he said there were no microphones in here. So she's like, to me, the Innie Helly would never just constantly be backing up things to make themes seem more safe in Lumon. She'd always be on alert. I also love Dylan's reaction to Rick and Hale being Mark's brother-in-law. That was great because he's a celebrity down there. And I also thought it was important what the camera does here, because when Mark says his outie knows Miss Cobel as well, Helly looks more worried than taking this as like shocking information, like that, oh shoot, like Mark knows that. And why it scares me is that he then shares the information that Miss Casey is his dead wife. So maybe that's something Helly, it's big information she's getting to now work on preventing that, if this is the Helly that is the outie Helly. Now, Helly lies and says she saw a boring apartment. This would fit with the outie Helly, but also fit with the Innie Helly, because I don't think she'd obviously want to tell them what she really was outside. But Irving catches her a little bit in a slip up because she mentioned seeing a gardener and he knows they were all out there at night. So it wasn't in the day, which was interesting. Now, Irv is so heartbroken, he doesn't say what he saw. I think that's important. It's a big reason they don't have him say in front of Helly, because if I'm thinking Helly's the outie version, she doesn't know this information that he will tell Dylan later about the dark hallway and how it led to an elevator with a down arrow, which we saw Miss Casey go down. So I think that's going to be a leeway for them to kind of have momentum against anything going on downstairs. And it's big, I think, if this is outie Helly that she didn't hear, that they know that. Now, they're trying to trick you, I believe, because they show Helly and Mark have this scene where they're talking about Mark's outie. And if she's asking if Miss Casey and him looked happy in the wedding photo, you see this can be looked at as jealousy by Innie Helly, or it could be looked at as a way where she's pushing things away a little bit too, of even like looking for Miss Casey at first, a little hesitant. But she says she doesn't care about outies, but Miss Casey's one of us, so if you want to help your outie and find out what happened to her, I'll help. But to me, that just fits perfectly as what someone who is a mole would say. Like, she wants him to look for her and see what he knows and what's really going on and keep an eye on him. Or this is just Innie Helly still, and she's a little jealous here, but she knows that this is really Miss Casey, not the outie version, and she wants to help her. Now, I love that Dylan talks Irv literally off the cliff of leaving here and ending his Innie's life, and he explains well to Irv that outie Bert is not his Bert. And they have a great bromance moment. And he's like, I'd be sad if I lost you. And I love that Irv says he's his greatest perk. Now, we see Milch still really annoyed that Miss Cobel is on his screen computer still, that name. Now, I'm in the belief of that last season he did rat her out to the board, and it was for him to move up. But I do think he doesn't want to see that on the screen because it's reminding him a little bit of betraying her. Now, he has Dylan come in, and he says, your wife's name is Gretchen. She wanted you to know. And I feel like this is damage control with Dylan, because they know that Dylan was getting angry there. He's like, I want to see my kid. And this whole thing of him showing the blueprint of the outie family vegetation suite could be something they never make. It could just be a false promise, or it's something they do make, but like he said, don't tell anyone else because you're the only one who isn't single here, and you want to avoid resentment. And he knows that Dylan loves perks, and this is the greatest perk of all. It's a thing that would make him want to run out there immediately to see his kid, but if he knows his kid could see him here, maybe Dylan kind of stays there and doesn't want to cause too much of a fuss if he could still see his family there. So that would be in line with his character as well, because Dylan, at the end of the day, does want to get the best perks and be a good worker. I also like it sets up that Dylan will have a secret with these characters around him that he's not telling them. And I also like it sets up the other secret of this episode about what's really going on. Whoever Helly is, if it's outie or Innie Helly, that Helly knows at the end of the day who her outie is, so that she hasn't told them. So I like having these little secrets between the group now. It makes it really interesting. Now, Miss Wong is playing a very dated, boring game on her computer. Then she grabs a portable water game, which I actually love those games where you get the hook and it's of Kier swimming. I love everything they do with Kier and his visual. Really cool. when they put him in anything. But we'll see that Irv stays and it's the band back together, back to work. Mark does the scary numbers. We see Miss Casey comes on a screen, but Mark didn't see this because it's a different backdrop behind the computer. We saw as the audience. You can make a guess that maybe he actually thought of that and that his Audi Mark had seen that at some point. But I do think that might have just been the show showing us what was really going on there. And what's cool is we see it says Cold Harbor on both screens of Miss Casey and of him just doing his normal work. So obviously to me, it's them getting rid of those 4 temps on Miss Casey. It's some technology they had to do it or think they know how to do. And it's all just kind of something they brainwash Miss Casey with, telling her that it's happening to her in another area. Who really knows yet? You just don't know. But it's really fascinating. And I thought it was a very strong beginning episode. It's not the best episode of the show, but it's good. It's a lot of setup and catching up and getting everyone together to set the stage for this season, especially coming from a wild finale. And like, how do you keep continuing from that crazy moment at the end? And I love they're keeping it secret right now what the hell is going on with the Audis out there. So we'll see how long they keep that secret and when we'll see the Audis. So really dug it. I'm giving this one an 8.7. Let me know your theories down below, your thoughts on the episode, everything. And please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews of Severance. I'll be also doing White Lotus and Yellow Jackets too. And I'll see you next time.